Hello and welcome to another epic themed edition of Life of Die. I'm your regular host Gordon, and once again I'm joined by fellow epic fanatic Craig. How you doing, Craig?
Hello there, I'm good, thanks.
Good stuff. In the series so far we've looked at the Space Marines, we've looked at the Eldar, and we've looked at the Imperial Guard, and as promised this time we're going to be looking at Chaos. Quick little reminder to listeners that these lists are not exhaustive, they're just our favourite armies, and we will try and cover some of the units that we don't choose. Anything we've missed, we will try and mention some of it, but it's definitely not exhaustive. Check out Crown of Command if you want to hear a full list of all the kind of units, all the special abilities and all those kind of things. It's a really good listen, and they're good guys over there, so always check them out as well, please. So yeah, Chaos then, as usual. A couple of things we need to talk about before there's always something kind of specific about an army that has to be discussed before we start. And I think the first thing to do would be about the actual composition of the armies. So normally it's a company card that you would have, that you would choose. That's the kind of base block of your army. But in this case, it's a Greater Demon that is the kind of building block. And for every Greater Demon you take, you must take at least 3 support cards, and you can take up to 5 as usual. But it's unusual in that respect that you have to take X number of support cards. The other thing to add about it, I suppose, would be the Chaos cards. I'm right in saying, Craig, that it's 3 Chaos cards for each Greater Demon in your force, is that right?
Yep, that's right. And then there's a special card for the Legion as well for each of the powers.
Yeah, that's been slightly neutered in the Epic. Not the special power for the Legion, just that the Primarchs, I think, are only, from memory, they only get 1 Chaos card, whereas the Evil Greater Demon still gets the 3. So it did kind of bring those Chaos cards under control a wee bit. I'm slightly ambivalent about it. I feel that they probably could be doing with 3 Chaos cards for each Greater Demon. So there's a few things about Chaos which I think are very tricky, but I think I'll reveal more about that once we get into lists. So as usual, we're going to be looking at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 and 5,000 point lists, and as usual, we'll start with the base 2,000. And shall we start with yours as is tradition, Craig?
Absolutely.
So what have you got for 2,000 points?
Yeah, so for 2,000 points, another thing worth mentioning about Chaos is that the 4 major powers are represented. So there's Khorne, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, and Nurgle, and there's specific cards for each of these factions as well. So if you take a Nurgle Greater Demon, you can't then take Khorne specific minion cards with them, that kind of thing.
Nice catch.
Yes. With that being said, there's also kind of generic Chaos things you can take, although there's not specifically generic Chaos Greater Demons, so you still need to base your forces in 2nd edition around one of the 4 powers Greater Demons effectively. And you can have Greater Demons from multiple powers mixed into your army. There's not the kind of anti-affinity rules that there are in later editions for that, but it does still restrict you quite a bit. And another thing worth mentioning as well was that Khorne certainly got the bulk of the specific units at the start of 2nd edition, and they kind of sort of balanced out towards the end, giving each of the other powers some units, but certainly early on in 2nd edition's life and even towards the end, you'd struggle to put together a force list with the other powers just by themselves. It normally has some sort of Khorne element in it. And I think we had a little bit of discussion before doing these lists that we would try to get representation in for all the powers in here. So you'll see a bit of that in our list, hopefully. But I think we boll have a contingent of Khorne for the most part.
Yeah, I think they've also got a lot of the... trying to avoid that word. They've got a lot of units. They've got a lot of units that are very cool looking.
Yeah, I think when most people think of Chaos, Khorne is what they're probably thinking of. It's that traditional representation of hell and demons and red and black and flames and skulls and all that kind of Games Workshop stuff, whereas the other powers are a wee bit more nuanced and follow different tropes. But yeah, you can easily build a Khorne force, or you can easily build a force mostly with Khorne stuff, but you'd probably struggle with the others a little bit.
And the one other thing I would say about why I always gravitate towards Khorne, apart from having a kind of good mix of unique vehicles and cavalry and infantry, is that it took me so long to paint those miniatures and put those skulls on every single one of those vehicles that I'm kind of damned if I'm not going to use them. And if I'm taking Chaos, they've got to feature. That's really my problem. That
Absolutely,
it was such a time sinkhole, but worth it because I think they're the coolest force that I have because I did put the hours in with them. The ones I'm kind of reasonably proud of, put it that way. Maybe not. I'm sure there'll be people who look at my pictures and go, they're a bit ropey. I think I've got a few chips on them now. They've seen a bit of action, so
All part of the charm, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. That means that they've been used and they've seen action, so that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I've actually cheated with my Khorne forces for the most part. I think most of them I picked up sort of second hand, pre-painted on eBay, and I maybe just threw a wash on them and called it done and based them all up the same.
You swine.
So it kind of leads into that whole thing. I've got this theory about basing. If you base everything the same, you can have it from multiple different painters and it'll kind of all be cohesive. But anyway, that's a thing for another day. So 2,000 points of chaos. I'm actually going all Khorne for my 2,000 points. Well, more or less. So I'm starting with the Bloodthirster, which is the Greater Demon for Khorne, and I'm taking him with some Flesh Hounds and Bloodletters and Juggernauts, or Juggers. And these are, again, iconic Chaos units. Everything is, so I'll not use that word again.
It's alright.
That's okay. The Bloodthirster herself is an absolute beast in close combat. I think he's plus 12 close assault factor, and if he wins or if he destroys someone in close combat, you can fight another round immediately with something else you're in contact with, which is pretty impressive. So you can even take down Titans and things in this edition fairly easily. He's also a skimmer, I believe. He's not a skimmer, is he? But he can.
Yeah, I'm sure he can fly.
Oh no, he is a skimmer. Yeah. So he can fly. He can move like a skimmer, ignoring terrain, which is decent as well. Because I think that's one of the things that we have with a lot of the greater demons is a bit of a lack of mobility. That can get him moving pretty well. He's still only got a 10 centimeter move, but then you've got I believe he still does the charge and first fire rules for him. So yeah, it still can get about decently enough. And then I'm taking, like I said, the Flesh Hounds are the kind of dogs of hell or whatever you want to call them. Again, they're just a good cavalry unit, decent close combat, decent move rate, pretty good all round for that. And the Bloodletters themselves are pretty tasty in close combat. I think everything in the Chaos Army, more or less, or most of those kind of lesser demons, cause some sort of morale check when charged against. So Chaos generally is very good against forces with low morale, things like Imperial Guard and Orcs. And sometimes win the fight before you even have to roll any dice, or forcing the opponent to roll some dice, which is pretty nice. The Bloodletters, they also regenerate, which means that when you kill them, you put them on their side and then you potentially bring them back at the end of the round if they don't get killed again. So they're good for kind of soaking up a lot of firepower and maybe diverting a bit of attention from your opponent. And then the other minion cards, the Khorne Juggers, which are another kind of cavalry unit. And this is kind of Chaos Champions riding these demonic mechanical steed type things. And their kind of special rule is that they always complete their charge. So even if you're charging units on first fire and they all get gunned down in that hail of fire, they'll still make it into close combat and they'll still fight. So it's pretty handy. And again, they're another close assault factor +5, as with the Bloodletters, so they're at an advantage to most things in the game when it comes to close assault factor. Again, none of that stuff's very shooty at all. They'd have a bolter that fires 25 centimeters and hits in a 6, but that's not what they're for. They're just for charging into things. And then to counter that very kind of close assault factor, close combat heavy side of the force, I've went with a Khorne Lord of Battles for my other Greater Demon, and it's effectively a kind of a small Titan. It's not got void shields, but it's got a hit template, carries multiple weapons. You can change out its loadout for different scenarios, so probably not really tested it out very much in the real world, but I think I'd probably go for the shooty options with it. Like I say, counter that, or to give me some sort of long-ranged firepower. I'd take the 2 ranged weapons on it. So to go along with that, I would take the Demon Engines of Khorne. So I think I'd take a card of Blood Reapers. And I think probably preempting what you're going to do later on. I think although that in the White Dwarf articles and even on the card itself, it shows you a mixed unit of Demon Engines. I'm just not sure I could be bothered with the admin of that. So I would tend to take them in groups of 3 of the same kind of engine just to keep things simple.
Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
I thought you'd like that one. I think I picked that tip up from you when I first saw it. So yeah, I'd go with Blood Reapers. Again, they're a bit more of a kind of shooty unit. I think it's even with most of the stuff in the Chaos Army, when I say it's shooty, it's still maybe only got a 50 centimeter range, but lots of attack dice and decent at taking out armor if you can get it into range. The other thing about these Demon Engines of Khorne, they get this crazy kind of bonus that if you're in the lead in victory points, you get +1 to most of your stats. So you get +1, I think, to your close assault, to your to hit, and +1 to their saving throw as well. So yeah. But yeah, so they get a really decent bonus, and it doesn't apply to everything on the Khorne side, thankfully, for your opponent, but it does apply to the Demon Engines. So yeah, it's pretty handy if you can get ahead. They suddenly become a lot more viable. My second card of Demon Engines, I would take Brass Scorpions. Now for this one, I'm kind of hindered by it's just what I have. So I've actually taken 2 Brass Scorpions, and going against my previous statement, I've taken a Death Dealer in the middle as well. But I'd maybe, if my opponent was willing, I'd maybe proxy it just to save us both the headache, because I don't really have. The thing with the Death Dealer is it can act as a troop transport, so I would maybe carry my Chaos Space Marines, which I've also got in there. But I think I'd probably just keep them as 3 Brass Scorpions for the sake of admin. And yeah, I think the Brass Scorpion again is a good kind of close combat tank. Pretty nasty, but it's got some shooting ability as well, so it's quite a good all-rounder. And then to finish off my force, I've got a group of Chaos Space Marines. Now, Chaos Space Marines are quite interesting. They're a bit of a kind of jack of all trades if you're comparing them to their Loyalist counterparts. So they move 10 centimeters, have a +3 close assault factor. They carry a missile launcher which has a range of 50. They only get to roll 1 attack dice, so they're not as dice heavy as like the Devastators, but it hits on a 4+ rather than a 5+ of the Devastator, so it's actually pretty good in that regards, and it's got a -1 save modifier.
Like a Devastator, yeah. For the modifier, I mean. The 4+, I think, makes a big difference from it being a 5+, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing with Epic, isn't it? It's hitting things, as we've discussed before. So anytime you can reduce that to hit roll, it's probably worth more than an extra dice at +5 is. Although, you know the odds on that, the probability on that better than I will. But yeah, it feels good. They're just a good all-round unit. They don't have the failings that tactical units have for the Loyalist Marines. Yeah, I'd take them over a card of tactical Marines any day of the week. So to transport them, I've stuck them in a Rhino. That's the trade-off with the Chaos Marines, is you don't get transport built in with them. You don't get Rhinos attached to them, and you have to take them as an extra support guard, which can eat up your allocation quite easily. But it is also another cheap way of getting a minion card in as well if you're struggling. So I've attached the Chaos Marines to that Rhino detachment, and that is my 2,000 points. What have you got?
Yeah, for my 2,000 points, it's interesting because the two of us have got fairly different for a 2,000 point. We're both going with Khorne, and yet we have not too much in common about what we've chosen, which is quite good, because I think we've been in agreement about too much up until now, so it's good that we're going to have some arguments here. So my 2,000 points list, I'm just going to run through it quickly, and then I'll start talking about them one by one. So I've got Angron, the Primarch of the World Eaters. I've taken 2 lots of Khorne Juggers. I've taken Cannon of Khorne. I've taken a squad of the Bloodletters, and I've also taken the Space Marine Legion because I've got Angron. That's something we did say that, didn't we, at the start, about you have to have the Primars to take the actual Legion specific to them.
Yeah, we didn't mention it, but that's a good thing to talk about.
So that's a big part of why I want Angron over the Bloodletter. It's not the only reason. I'll explain more about that in a second. I'll just finish this off first. So I've got the Space Marine Legion. I've taken not very flavourful, but at 2,000 points I want to be careful. I kind of feel like I've got to maximise my bang for buck. So my instinct would be to take Demon Engines, but at this point's cost I thought, no, I can't justify it. So I've taken 2 squadrons of Land Raiders, which, you know, well documented what we think about them. They're great, dependable, good range, good power. And something you're going to see in these pictures of the if you're watching on YouTube is that because I've only got like 2 of each kind of card, there's a card missing here. So if you total up, you'll see that it's 50 points short, and in actual fact I've got 3 squadrons of Rhinos. I think I overlook that Death Dealer a bit too often, to be honest. I think it's actually a good way to go about it. And I think actually there could be an argument for actually going against what I would usually do and put 3 of a kind in the one squad. I think that a good way to do it would be to have 2 of the one type and have a Death Dealer in there carrying 5 troops of World Eaters into battle and get them up a wee bit faster. I'm not convinced from memory that the Death Dealer is that fast, but
it's just got a 15 centimetre move, so it's not great.
It's better than nothing, aye.
Yeah.
Again, it's... If you're playing 2nd edition, it's not a brilliant help. But again, as we discussed in the last episode, with Net Epic, because it's 5 centimetres off your move at either end, you can get your trips up quite a bit further. So yeah, that's basically the force I've got. So the Rhinos, as I say, are really there to get those World Eaters up the board as quickly as possible. With that 50 range, to me, it's really crucial that you get them positioned properly in turn 1, get them into the buildings or the forests, whatever it is that you've got the cover. And again, same advice as I would say about Devastators back in when we're talking about Space Marines. You want them having good vantage points over the battlefield, but you do need to be a bit more careful than you would be with Devastators because of that range issue. But the 75 down to 50 centimetres does make a big difference, especially if you're playing against an army such as the the Marines or Eldar, which have a lot of good range and will sit back a lot and make your Chaos Force really pay a heavy price if you can't get them into position. So for me, the Rhinos, I suppose, they're also quite a good, because of this, what we were talking about earlier on, you've got to take 3 support cards. They're actually quite a good filler card. So you can basically, the Space Marine Legion takes care of itself because if you're buying 3 lots of Rhinos, because actually taking the 3 support cards required. The reason I plumped for those Land Raiders is partly about the range, the 75 range, because I wanted something to counter if I'm coming up against the Marines or Eldar in particular. Imperial Guard equally as well, to be quite honest. The Orcs are a wee bit easier going because their range tends to be 50 centimetres, so it's not so much a problem because the Orcs will be coming at you anyway. So I just wanted that extra bit of range. And there's another reason which I will come to when I get onto the Demon Engines later on about why I think at 2,000 points you really want the Land Raiders. The Khorne Juggers, brilliant. I love them. I love anything with +6 calf. Or is it +5 calf?
Uh-huh.
And as you say, that rule is really handy about they complete their charge and therefore will still carry out close combat. So I mean that's quite powerful against the likes of a vehicle. If you charge them at Land Raiders, the Land Raiders might shoot some of them down, but you can complete those moves and you can basically smash through the Land Raiders. So yeah, they're not to be underestimated. They are a bit slower than the likes of bikes that we've been talking about them so enthusiastically in previous episodes. So they're a much slowed down version, but when they get in amongst the enemy, they're really, really effective and really powerful. And if you can see that there's vehicles there, I actually would take the chance at charging them down, even if it meant losing a couple of them, particularly if it's super heavy tanks. You could do some damage. The other thing we should say is that the Chaos cards that you get that we mentioned at the start, most of them are like bonuses to your calf. So you can play these to really skew close combat a lot of the time. You do have other abilities that are in there, kind of strange things, but I don't really want to get through into every single different card. But the majority of them seem to be kind of bonuses to calf. I don't know if you agree with that, Craig, or not.
Yeah, I mean, we should mention that one of the purposes of the Chaos cards is you can actually use them to save your Greater Demon from destruction. As long as it's not being attacked by like a psychic weapon, you can discard the card. So some of them are kind of filler or fairly niche use cases, and normally just keep them. Obviously, you don't get to choose when you discard one, but if you've got these in your hand, you might just know from the outset after looking at your cards which ones you're going to use and which ones you're just going to keep for trying to save a demon.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I used to always just keep them for the Greater Demons, but I've come around to the opinion that actually you're much better playing them and they're much better being used rather than on a Greater Demon. And I tend to be actually quite cowardly with my Greater Demons because...
I've noticed.
Yeah, I know it's not very flavourful, but again, I just feel it's one of those things you don't want them sitting out there. It's going to cause problems. The whole army, do they have to take a morale check if the Greater Demon goes?
It's just if they're in sight of them, I think, if it's in line of sight.
Which is why I try to keep them out of line of sight. I mean, in fairness, it's unlikely that your Chaos Army, that they've got really good morale, unlike the Imperial Guard and Orcs. They're much more in line with the Marines, I would say. So, yeah, I suppose I worry a bit too much about that. But the other reason is that I don't find the Greater Demons particularly effective. So I kind of feel it's a bit of a waste of time, like having them sitting out, just soaking up, spending Chaos cards.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I like to play those cards if I can, and I like to keep the Greater Demons largely if I can, and would be my personal preference because it means that they can't be got at except by units who really can't take them down.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing would be maybe an avatar. The other thing I was going to say was that about the Greater Demons, and well, particularly the 2 Khorne ones anyway, I do feel they're fairly limited in what they can do. To me, they operate like the Avatar, that you're going to keep moving them through basically to the closest enemy unit, try and get them into close combat. They will butcher whatever they get into combat with, unless it happens to be a Titan. Like you said, they can actually take Titans on, and if you've got a bunch of those Chaos cards, you can actually skew it in your favour as well. So that's why they shouldn't be underestimated for that. But I don't know if it's just the way we play, and if other people charge their Titans up a lot more than we do, but we tend to, I think the sensible thing is to sit with them and use them as weapons platforms, plugging away from the back. So in practice, I don't really see Greater Demons getting that opportunity too much. I think maybe possibly against Eldar because they are a Titan that does get moved about because of the necessity to do so. But I would imagine a wily Eldar opponent would be quite alert to the dangers of a Greater Demon running, getting anywhere close to his Titans. So I'd imagine they would still just move them, but not necessarily move them very far. That's one of those strange rules that's always caused a bit of discussion over the years about the Holofields, is that people feel like if they're going to be on advanced orders, they should actually move at least maybe 10 centimetres or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas you can really game it and just, which frankly I've been guilty of over the years, probably against you as well, Craig, about moving them in like 2 centimetres and things, and they still get the bonus of the advanced move. My counter argument to that would be because you're not in first fire, you're not getting into fire till later on in the turn, so there is a big disadvantage in it as well. So anyway, I feel like I'm getting bogged down with Eldar now, and that's not what we're talking about. So the Khorne Juggers love Angron. I do actually prefer to the Bloodletter. I agree with what you're saying, it gets a double attack, which is useful. But again, it's one of these things that I'm aware of. Yes, they will butcher whatever he gets into, but it's really, when you think about it, it's 2 stands per turn, really is what you'll be able to fight.
Yeah.
Again, it's that thing with the Eldar, the Avatar. That's all it does, it moves into close combat. And I realised after a while not to shoot at them, because I'm just thinking, well, the worst it's going to do is take off maybe 2 infantry stands over the whole battle because of their move rate. And I kind of think the Greater Demons are very similar in that respect. That certainly the Khorne ones, because it is basically the close combat. Angron's power I do actually think is better than the double attack of the Bloodthirster, because he has this fearsome roar which basically can cause morale checks. Probably doesn't mean much if you're playing against Marines. Eldar as well are pretty good with their morale, but if you're up against the Imperial Guard or the Orcs, yeah, Angron's really good. Get him out there and get him up the board as fast as possible and use that ability, because it can have a few units running away from you pretty quickly. So I do favour Angron out of the 2 for that reason. And as I say, I wanted to have the Space Marine Legion there. I agree with you about all the stats. You've covered it all there about the World Eaters, or the generic Chaos Marine as it were. One thing I would say is that when we play it, it's slightly different. It's another unit that came in that Net Epic's got. I don't know if it was ever in any of the previous articles or anything like that, but basically they've got Berserkers, and they have, I think, +6 calf from memory. And the thing that's really great, I've put it in the wee photo there, the Blood Rager Khorne, when you've got these Berserkers, all the models in the unit may make a charge move this turn, even if they do not have charge orders. Units with charge orders triple their move allowance. All the models in the unit roll an extra d6 in close combat. So you put your Berserkers into Rhinos, the Rhinos charge, you disembark, you've got triple movement, so you can basically get from one side of the board to the other, is how it actually works out with that. And you've got an extra d6 in close combat. So the only thing you might struggle against a wee bit would be Striking Scorpions, because they've got 3d6 +6. Anything else, I think you're going to absolutely carve through it. So anybody that's playing 2nd edition, I would really recommend checking out the Net Epic thing, because the Space Marine Legions, they do have like a specific detachment which is unique to their own. But certainly it's the Berserkers are the ones that are the big standout for me in those units. I'm trying not getting bogged down with all the Net Epic talk. And the one other thing I've got is the Cannon of Khorne. Now, I've got a bit of a I don't know if I love these guys or not in a relationship with the Cannon of Khorne, because of that 1 in 6 chance with the misfire, and it seems to happen more than 1 in 6 times.
Yeah, I've seen it quite a few times.
So that misfire, basically, if you roll that, it blows up the cannon. So I'm not that mad on the Cannon of Khorne, but I feel that they've got to be in there, especially because I wasn't taking any of the demon engines. Just didn't have the points to do it. I suppose I could have. No, I couldn't have, because I wanted the Marines and the Bloodletters. I felt like I needed some, ground troops, basically. The Juggers are kind of fulfilling that cavalry function. And yeah, something else. Just, again, I really like the models, because I like all the detail that's on them. And again, they took me just to paint, so they're going in that battlefield. Whether I like them or not is another. When they work well, they work well. I suppose that's the thing, because they get I think it's -3 modifier, and they can basically fire line of sight. So you can be quite clever with them if you've got a good lot of open board and you sit in one corner. You can really have a go at units, pretty indiscriminately. So if you're fortunate the way the board is set up, particularly if it was a hill, that would be even better. Up at the top of a hill, one corner of the board, just firing anything they can see. That would be pretty good for me. And the last thing I've got is the Khorne Bloodletters. And again, I just totally agree with you. The +5 calf is brilliant. It will beat most things, Aspect Warriors and Terminators aside. But again, you've got those Chaos cards, which usually give you those close combat bonuses, so you can really even the odds quite easily with those. Yeah, and that's my 2,000 point army. So yeah, on to 3,000 points. What have you got, Craig?
Yep, so for my 3,000 point list, it's the same core as my 2,000 point list, so I've still got that same Khorne contingent of the Bloodthirster with the Flesh Hounds, Bloodletters and Khorne Juggers, and then the Lord of Battles with the 2 cards of Demon Engines and the Chaos Space Marines. Now I've dropped the Rhinos this time, so I am opting to pop the Space Marines into Death Dealer, so it's 2 Brass Scorpions and a Death Dealer for that card. Worth mentioning as well, something we didn't mention because there's so many rules for Chaos, but the Demon Engines as well, they cannot first fire, they can only charge or advance, which generally speaking isn't such a problem for them because most of them are close combat focused or closer combat focused. But I said it was +1 to the close assault factor they get. It's actually an extra d6 they get in close combat if Khorne are winning or if Chaos are winning. So it's actually a fairly decent bump they get in that regard. But yeah, so that's my Khorne contingent. It's just under 2,000 points, 1950, and then I've opted to take some Slaanesh for the remainder of the points. Now I've taken the Keeper of Secrets, which is the Slaanesh Greater Demon. Again, most of the Greater Demons, as you've mentioned already, are kind of underwhelming a wee bit. They all kind of have a bit of a unique selling point, but none of them are that impressive. So he's similar to the Bloodthirster in as much as he's got a +10 close assault factor this time, so not quite as good. And he basically just has this 25 centimeter hit on a 4, 5, or 6 attack, which effectively just outright kills something. There's no saving throw for it. It's called the Aura of Slaanesh. It's actually a wee barrage template you place, just another kind of 6 centimeter one. So if you can get him into range and get him up against, super heavy tanks or something like that, you've got a good chance of just wiping them off the board. But again, savvy players will see this kind of lumbering half-cow lobster thing coming towards them and probably try to avoid it as best they can. But the reason I've taken a Slaanesh contingent is so that I've got access to the Subjugator Scout Titans. So that was the kind of... Slaanesh had almost no love placed upon them for the duration of the life of 2nd edition, right up until the kind of dying days of it after Titan Legions came out. And they were given this whole kind of lore backstory about a heretic knight household, House Divine, that joined their ranks, and they were then given a whole bunch of weird-looking bipedal scout walkers and some scout titans as well to join their forces, and it filled a bit of a gap in the Chaos forces. We didn't really have that kind of element at all. And I love scout titans, I love my warhounds, and I love the revenants, so it's kind of befitting that I take them. And they're a little bit different to before mentioned. They don't have hollow field or void shields at all. They rely on this kind of glamour of Slaanesh, which is another -1 to hit effectively. Anything shooting at them can't see them because of all the sparkle and glitter or whatever it is, and they take a -1 to hit. On top of that, because they're Scout Titans, they've got the Agile rule as well, so if you're charging them, they effectively have a -2 to hit, which is pretty decent. So you've got a good chance of getting them into position without them getting hit at all in most cases. And then once they've got decent armaments as well as these Hell Claws, which give them an extra d6 and cost assault factor and a penetrating hit if they get in there. So they're good at hunting down other small Titans or even big Titans or things of that ilk. So yeah, they're a really kind of good all-round unit, and I just really like them. I quite like the models as well. I'm not overly fond of a lot of the kind of Slaanesh stuff, but I do like any kind of bipedal Titan type thing. So yeah, they're a must-have for me. So to accompany them, I've taken Slaanesh Beast Riders, which again, I was just trying to fit something in that was Slaanesh specific. I could have taken something, Chaos Marine or sort of the kind of general hordes of Chaos, but I wanted to bring some kind of Slaanesh specific stuff. So the Beast Riders are just another kind of general decent cavalry unit, nothing special at all. I think it's a +3 close assault factor, 20 centimeter move, and they've got bolters again, so they've got no special rules to them, but they're a decent cavalry option for 150 points. They're not bad. They fill out a slot, especially with a lot of the Chaos stuff is quite lumbering slow. It's good to get as much speed in there as you can, I think. And then to round off that force, I've taken some lesser demons. I've taken the Demonettes of Slaanesh, and again, most of the kind of lesser demons follow the same stat line or a similar stat line where it's kind of 10 centimeter move. They've got a saving throw of 4+, a close assault factor of 4+, but because, and similar to the Plague Bearers, which we may or may not talk about, they have this ability to force a morale check when they get close enough to the enemy troops. So again, you've got that potential of just winning the battle without fighting, which is quite nice. But I think generally there's probably better things to take. They are fairly weak when you compare them to some of the other things you could get for the same price value, or the same cost value. But I'm trying to build in as much flavour to these forces as possible. So I'd like to take them, and I'd like to also try and find a way of getting them to work. I think the mistakes I've made previously with taking Chaos is potentially overexposing things on turn 1 because you can't get into range to fight anything, and you need to kind of hold them back for maybe a turn to get them in there. And if you've got things that are foot slogging at 10 centimetres, then it might take you a few turns. It's just a bit of a kind of patience game then at that point to try and wait to spring the trap with them, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I find that that's the kind of general way most Chaos battles have gone for me, is that the first few turns, you know you're in for a lot of pain, which is why that, even though that sounds great about the corners winning, it gets that bonus that you were mentioning there about the plus d6 to their combat and +1 to rolls to hit and whatever else it is. The problem with that is Chaos is such a slow force and kind of lumbering, which is why I was trying to get like Rhinos into it as well, that quite often if you're up against a really agile force, then they can really effectively steal maybe like up to 6 objectives, depending on where you place them. I suppose it depends how giving your opponent is. If they take into consideration the fact that you've got Chaos, and they maybe allow you to put the objectives a little deeper than you might normally. But I think our kind of general thing is that we usually end up having about 4 of the objectives fairly close to the middle of the board, you and I. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, certainly I always try and get to your objectives as close to the halfway line as possible, that's definitely for sure. So that can make it really tricky. It means that, if you're playing it that way, in all likelihood you're only going to secure maybe 2 objectives in turn 1, and the other player's definitely going to have 4. And if they've got bikes and so on, then they might well have 6, which means that you start off losing basically, and it's really up to your opponent to make sure they kill enough of your force before you get into the battle, because once you get them into the battle, that's when it can actually turn. So I've found it quite painful playing Chaos, because it's so slow for you to get into the game. You always feel like you're playing catch up, and it always feels like a big relief if you can actually turn the game on its. You get to a point where it's like, right, all these really powerful, great close combat specialists can finally get in amongst the enemy. That's really when I find that they tend to work best, but it does usually means at least turn 1. I would say probably turn 2 as well, possibly even in turn 3 before you're going to have everything in it, those enemy forces, just because of the speed factor. So yeah, very tricky to play, I would say, for that reason. It's another reason as well why I protect those Greater Demons so much as well, because it's not just the Greater Demons. I actually try and hide as much of the force as I possibly can, because I know that's how it's going to play out, I suppose. So yeah, sorry, totally stole your thunder there.
No,
I just wanted to mention that.
I'm happy for any advice I can get, because I think the mistake I've made previously is just had these troops kind of foot slogging and, like I say, overexposed them, and then just had them cut down turn 1 and 2 and had nothing left for turn 3 to really threaten you. So yeah, I think you're right. You definitely need to be a bit more tactical with them.
I think it's probably a force, if you want to be really sporting about it as an opponent. I think you should always take the likes of the Orcs or Imperial Guard against them. I don't feel Marines and Eldar is particularly fair, because again, the Eldar with their close combat specialists, Chaos aren't, even when they do get into the fight, they aren't quite as effective as they would be against anyone else. And I feel both of those forces have so much ranged weaponry that it's really, really difficult for you to deal with it at all, other than just basically hide the stuff until you finally got them into range. It's a range factor as well, which I'm going to come on to in a minute or two. Yeah, really tough to play. So I think if you were, particularly for somebody that's starting out in Chaos, it might be more sporting for you to take, if you're playing against somebody like that that's trying that out, I would say be a bit fair on them and try and take something when you know the morale value is going to kind of go against you, but at least it gives Chaos a bit of a fighting chance, I think, especially when you're getting to grips with it. So next time you and I play, Craig, and you're taking Chaos, I will definitely take, you just tell me when you're doing it and I'll take I'll maybe take the Orcs, because I think I kind of feel that's the kind of fairest actually of all the forces. I feel that the Imperial Guard still can do the tank thing and sit at range and pick off stuff, so I think I would be minded to take the Orcs in, and it could be a really interesting battle, just the sheer power of Chaos. Each of these units deal with the numbers of the Orcs, and I think it could be quite a fun battle. And also all these morale checks suddenly come into play, and Orcs scattering left, right and centre.
Exactly. I think that's something I would be quite keen on seeing, because it's never really been a factor in any of the games we've played. But yeah, it's definitely a big selling point for them. I think it also comes down to force composition as well, and what kind of force you take, because effectively you've got 2 sides to the coin. You've got Khorne and Nurgle, which have very slow moving, no shooting ability for Nurgle for a lot of the stuff at all. And if you're to field, those 2 forces together, you'd have to have a really solid game plan to get them into combat. Whereas with the later additions to Slaanesh, with all the Night Titans and stuff like that, and Tzeentch Flyers and things which I'm sure you'll come on to, they have a bit more maneuverability, and you can play them a little bit more kind of fast and loose, I guess. And also mixing in some of the generic Chaos Space Marine forces like the Land Raiders and Rhinos and Land Speeders and bikes that you can take, helps to bolster that if you're lacking lacking in that department. So I think Chaos probably has the most variety of all the forces.
Yeah.
But it's easy if you're trying to be thematic or if you're trying to take the kind of power specific stuff. It is very easy to get bogged down with a one-trick pony effectively for either shooting or close combat or whatever it is. So variety is the spice of life, I think. But yes, that's my 3,000 points. What have you got?
Okay, so yeah, I've worked in the same kind of shell again as I usually do. Angron, 2 sets of Juggers, the World Eaters with 3 sets of Rhinos again, and I think the Bloodletters again and the Cannon of Corn. So all that's the same. What I have taken extra this time, I've taken the Lord of Battles. I have to say I don't get as much success as the model demands. Is my feeling about the Lord of Battles. I love the model. I really love it. And again, how many skulls was there to paint in that thing? So I always want it on the table, but I always feel it's a bit slow and the weapons aren't overly amazing. However, 500 points. So, but then on the other hand, you could get 2 Warhounds for that. So that's always in my mind. It's definitely not as good as 2 Warhounds, that's for sure. You've always got to take a close combat weapon, did you not?
I don't think there's anything specifically mentions that. I did have a look for that because I also thought it was just the way it was modelled. I always thought that the left arm had the ranged weapon, but it's actually one on each, so you can model it with both.
Right, okay.
I certainly don't think I've seen anything in the rules for it to say that.
It's just that the miniatures always kind of came with, I think mine's is the Hellblade and the Doomburner is a kind of ranged weapon.
No, you're right, but they are on opposite arms, so you could, if you were feeling flush and you bought 2 of them, you could have one of each.
Right, I didn't realise that.
Yeah, it says in the rules, it says Lord of Battle can carry a variety of weapons combinations, normally one of these close combat weapon to further augment its fighting ability, but any of the weapon choice listed below can be mounted in Lord of Battle's arms. So yeah, you can take either or.
Good stuff. Yeah, so I've taken the Lord of Battles and I dropped out 400 points worth of the Land Raiders that I'd taken in the 2,000 point army. And this time I've taken 3 lots of Demon Engines of Khorne. Now, I've got a real love-hate relationship with the Demon Engines of Khorne. Again, I absolutely love the miniatures. They took me ages to paint. They've got so much detail, but they just look great. I really, really like the design of them. But my big problem with them is that as you mentioned earlier on, the best you're doing is with the Blood Reaper and the Tower of Skulls. The 2 of them have got 50 range. Now, the big problem with it is that in practice it's very difficult to get those weapons actually in the fight because the first turn you're going to be wanting to charge them just to get them close to range. And the problem is I think you could get them in range, so they could get 30 moves, so you could definitely at the end of turn 1 if you charged them. If you advance them, you're not likely to get into range of anything unless your opponent is being a bit brave. So you're not really that likely to get into range in turn 1, so that kind of puts you in the situation where you're going to do a charge move. And then you're not allowed to first fire with the Demon Engines, which basically means the first time you're going to be able to fire is in the advanced phase of turn 2. Now, that's ample opportunity for Eldar Marines to just basically wipe them out before they even get into the fight. So it's really, really tricky. So again, I play this very kind of cagey game with Chaos, that all these tanks, again, I'm trying to get them in behind buildings, I'm trying to get them behind hills or behind woods, something just so that they're not in line of sight in that first turn. And it does mean in turn 2, you can't avoid it. You're going to have to move them out and expose them and hope basically they survive through that first fire phase, because a canny opponent will have the stuff just lined up, first fire, ready to wipe your Demon Engines out. So that I wish they were better than they are, and I really struggle to use them. Yeah, that's basically my problem with them, unfortunately. But I really love them, and I love the weapon. They've got, good firepower if you can get them in. That Blood Reaper's got effectively 6 attack dice. The Tower of Skulls has got 5 attack dice. Yeah, the Blood Reaper falls into that category of having 2 weapons, but for some reason I'm okay with it with this. Even though I didn't like it with the Lehman Russ the other week in the Imperial Guard. But yeah, 2 of the dice, 2 of that 6 dice is -2 and 4 of them are -1. Whereas the Tower of Skulls, I suppose you could say the Tower of Skulls has a 2+ save all round, so that's where it kind of benefits, because it's got 1 attack dice less and it's got nothing at -2. I would say that the Blood Reaper, personally speaking, is probably the best of the Demon Engines, and I'd probably take the Tower of Skulls. I would take Blood Reapers and Cauldron of Blood. Again, it's one of these ones that's got the big fire template, and I'm a big fan of the fire template for smoking out those woods and buildings of infantry. So it's a great way of clearing the way and making things even easier for your demonic troops because you're going to thin out the numbers if you've got those Cauldron of Blood. I've never really been a great fan of the Death Dealer. I mean, he's got absolutely stacks of dice, but it's only got one dice it's for 50 range and 6 of the dice at 25 centimetre range. Again, very tricky to get that into the range to actually start really making use of it. But yeah, I always forget, as I said earlier on, the transport function. So yeah, they could be a good replacement for rhinos. And then hopefully once they've dropped the troops off, you can get them up into some range and do some damage with them. But yeah, they've got a good calf as well, because it's got that kind of, I'm never really sure what that was meant to be, the kind of character at the front of it that's got kind of swords. Is it actually a demon itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's kind of fused to the fuselage
yeah.
or something. It's kind of strange. But I think I probably need to look at the Death Dealer again. It's definitely a decent option. It's just that thing of, can you get it into 25 centimetre range? And that's what I kind of feel doubtful and puts me off with it. Yeah, so that was my 3,000 points. So we're on to 4. What have you got, Craig?
Yep, so for my 4,000 points list, I've tried to work a little bit in Nurgle this time. Mostly because I just think they're kind of underrepresented. Again, they were another one that didn't get much love until the latter stages of second edition, so tried to work them in as best as possible. So the core is still Khorne because, there's just so much variety of Khorne, so I've kept it the same with the Bloodthirster, Khorne Juggers, Bloodletters, Hounds, and then Lord of Battles with the 2 cards of Demon Engines and the Marines riding in a Death Dealer again. Slaanesh contingent, exactly the same again. Keeper of Secrets, Subjugator Scout Titans, Slaanesh Beast Riders and Demonettes. And then for the Nurgle contingent, I tried really hard, but there's just so little for them, in my opinion. It's maybe worth taking, especially alongside Khorne, like I mentioned earlier. Maybe if you could work them in with fielding them with a bigger contingent of Tzeentch or something, then it might be viable. But I feel like the Great and Clean one, Greater Demon, it's got 5 centimetre base move, so it always charges. So you're still only moving a maximum of 10 centimetres per turn with them. Getting into combat is going to be nigh on impossible unless someone walks into you. So I think probably in a kind of bit of a fix for Nurgle later on, they brought out the Plague Tower, which functions as a Greater Demon. It's effectively the Chaos version of the Leviathan in terms of its kind of loot and function. So it can carry 15 stands of troops, and they can actually perform like a boarding action. If you can get into close combat with troops in a building, they can spill out of it into the building without having to take a penalty for movement, or they don't suffer the combat penalty for fighting outside, that kind of thing. Very situational, probably has never actually happened in the game, but cool idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I always thought that. I always thought it was cool. But again, in practice, how can you actually get it in to do that? And it's going to be the focus of all fire if you've got troops loaded up in it as well, which is the other problem.
Yeah. It'd be great to have some kind of like Helm's Deep type scenario with big siege kind of battle where you had loads of these things and could do something like that. But I think a lot of the time these rules are just made for the rule of cool rather than,
Yeah. Funny you mentioned Lord of the Rings there, because one of the things that I think they did in Lord of the Rings, well, I didn't think they did that deliberately by any stretch of the imagination, but in Return of the King, there's these big tower things which basically slam into the parapets and the orcs spill out of them and that. And it's very similar actually to the idea behind the Plague Towers. So yeah, I always loved the idea of that. But unfortunately, these were the most elusive miniatures of all actually for me with the Plague Towers. So
yeah,
I finally got some, but they're not painted yet. But yeah, I'm looking forward to trying them out.
It was actually the thing that kind of spurred me on to collect Chaos. Or didn't spur me on to collect Chaos, but it was one of the first miniatures I did pick up a couple of years ago when I decided I was going to maybe dip my toes into it, because I didn't mention it before, but Chaos definitely wasn't one of the armies or one of the forces that we had as kids the first time around. I think both my brother and I had a bit of a disdain for them because we were both kind of World War II or modern combat buffs at heart and didn't really want to ruin anything of our immersion by having flappy demons flying around or pink horrors or any of that kind of stuff. So we both had a bit of a disdain for them, but I've kind of grown to respect them in my older and wiser years.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I'd bought I had the full box, so I had the kind of basic, infantry, like the Beast Riders and the Disc Riders and Chaos Marines and Juggers and all that plastic stuff. So I had that, but I had nothing else. I had none of the Demon Engines, which you really need. When you have them. I think I was maybe proxying with Land Raiders or something like that.
Yeah.
And what I was using was basically 40k miniatures for the Greater Demons, which in fairness actually wasn't really a big problem because they did come out pretty much the same size anyway. So didn't really create many problems. But yeah, it was Chaos. It was Chaos 40k Marines that we had. I can't remember why we had them, but yeah, I definitely had a pack of those. So I used to use for the Greater Demons because I didn't have any of the Greater Demons. So I think it was probably mid 2000s when I actually started picking up the miniatures and certainly painting them. I think it was maybe around about 2010 even. I don't know. Certainly when I recorded it all on Tactical Command, there's a thread there somewhere about my Chaos stuff. So yeah, I had a very similar thing where I came to play them properly. It was pretty late on in the process. I think probably that's shown tonight for our regular listeners. I think it's fair to say our knowledge is, like, we know the stats inside out for quite a few of the forces, but I would say that Chaos is definitely, I think partly because of the sheer variety and all the special rules that there are for each of them. Well, for a number of the units, there's certainly some gaps in my knowledge, so I apologise for it's getting frustrated with us going, what is it, -1 or -2, all that stuff. So it's because we came to it late in the game, and it's a hard force to play on a regular basis because, for the reasons I said earlier on, it's quite tricky to play them. So they're not, to me, the most fun force. But I should make more of an effort, definitely. I think probably if you really want to play successfully with them, you probably should put some more Land Raiders into your force, because you need something with range on it. But I've not done it, except for that 2,000 point army where I felt it was really kind of crucial. I've tried to kind of stay flavourful so that we actually talk about proper Chaos, the same as yourself. Anyway, I've derailed you again.
No, that's totally fine. It's all stuff I had on the tip of my tongue anyway, so it's all good. But yeah, the Plague Tower functions as a greater demon for taking Nurgle stuff, which is great. It still has to be issued orders, so it doesn't get the charge in first fire, which is unfortunate because it moves 15 centimetres, so it would actually be quite a handy one to get up the field, but obviously that'd be a bit daft looking, this trundling box on wooden wheels flying up the battlefield at 30 centimetres. But it's Chaos, you could justify it somehow, I'm sure. But
put some wings on it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's something I meant to mention earlier, actually, as well, about Angron with his big flappy wings, but he's not a skimmer, but the Bloodthirster is. Just an interesting note, but anyway. But yeah, Plague Tower 1+ saving throw all round, a bit like Leviathan. In Net Epic again, it gets that Praetorian style or kind of Titan style template to make it a little bit more survivable, but I think they probably mess with the cost or whatever of it a little bit for that. +8 close assault factor, lots of weapons with lots of dice, but all very short range again. It's got 50 centimeter rock cannon, which is its big barrage weapon. It does -4 target save modifier, and then everything else is 25 centimeters or 15 centimeters. So again, it's one of these ones you need to get in close to do any real damage, which at 15 centimeters movement is going to be difficult. But it's the way of getting another greater demon in the field. I think it probably still represents better value than most of the greater demons that you see in terms of what it can do. It's a little bit more useful, I guess, than greater demons, and it can still be saved by the chaos cards in that way, so it's a little bit more survivable as well. So there maybe is a chance if the game goes on long enough. If your opponent is foolish enough to let the game go on long enough, then you could probably do some real damage with it. And again, it gets you those 3 chaos cards, so fantastic. I couldn't think to justify getting in any more Nurgle-specific units though into my force. I wanted to bring in the Plague Bearers because I've got a couple of units of them, but they're effectively the same as the Slaanesh Demonettes, but the only difference is I think they regenerate. Oh no, in fact they don't regenerate, and I find it bizarre that they don't regenerate because the Bloodletters regenerate, and yet Plague Bearers in the lore these days are very hard to kill and disgustingly resilient. I think it's a special rule they get in 40k, but yeah, it's a weird one. They don't regenerate, so they're essentially exactly the same stats as the Demonettes, and they even have that same forcing of the morale check, just for a different reason. Rather than being covered in glitter and organs, they have a cloud of flies around them, so it's it's that same thing.
Why have I got a unicorn My Little Pony in my head when you keep saying a big glitter?
I think that's probably not far from the truth, but I don't really want to delve into that side of the internet. I'm sure if they find us, yeah, exactly. That's a whole different series. But yeah, the Plague Bearers, if I didn't have the Demonettes, I'd maybe take them just for that kind of thing. But they are just fairly useless unless you can. I think at the time I played with them, I tried to load some of them into the Plague Tower to get them up the field a little bit faster, but you're not getting much movement out of them, so it's tough. What I did bring, though, was the Troll Warband, which I guess is, for all the reasons I've just said, is probably a similar kind of justification, but they do have the regeneration factor about them.
Yeah.
You get quite a lot of them. You get 10 stands of them, plus a Chaos Champion who's pretty decent in his own right.
And they're +6, aren't they, Calf?
Yeah, plus 5, sorry, yeah.
Maybe the Minotaurs are +6. I always get the two of them mixed up because.
No, the Minotaurs are +5 as well. The only difference between the Trolls and the Minotaurs is the Trolls are stupid, so they have that chance to ignore their orders, is it? I think, whereas the Minotaurs don't. So the Minotaurs are a wee bit more reliable, but they don't have the regeneration. So it's a bit of a toying cost which one you want to take there. But yeah, again, I'd maybe put the trolls to avoid that whole issue with them not taking their orders or whatever. I'd maybe load them into the plague tower and transport them up the field a bit and then release them into the wild maybe a couple of turns in to give them a better chance of getting into combat. Plus, like I say, it's just that thing. If you do get the opportunity to charge a building and release the trolls into the building, then that's brilliant. That's cinematic and it's worth it even if you lose the game. Yeah, I also opted to take another stand of Chaos Space Marines just because they're good for 150 points. I think I could have maybe finessed it a little bit and got something different for a bit more variety, but I think they're just a solid. If you can't think of what to take, then they're a fairly solid unit. And then I took some land speeders for my last 200 points because at this point I was just yearning for something decent. I hate to say it, but I was just yearning for something reliable that you know is going to either get very far or do a lot of damage or be great in close combat. And we've talked about them in the Marine chat, but the land speeders are probably one of my favourite units in the game, and the fact you can take them as part of your Chaos army is great because they do fill a gap which I need to fill in my army, which is something really fast that can shoot really well if it gets into it. And for all the reasons we've discussed before, I just think they're great. And it's because I couldn't find anything Nurgle to stick in there at all.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as well that would avoid the situation I was talking about earlier on, where you'll be lucky if you get 2 objectives in turn 1. If you've got those land speeders, you'll be able to do now take at least 3. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
The thing that I don't like about this is that I would much rather the army was absolutely loaded full of just like pure chaos and not kind of Marines by the back door, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. I was just going to reinforce that. I think far from being another Net Epic advert, as these chats might seem to turn out a lot of the time, the Net Epic Chaos in particular has really fleshed out. They've got the specific units, they've got, extra units for all the forces to the point where you can field a full Nurgle force or a full Tzeentch force without having to dip into the other powers if you really wanted to and still have that variety of units. They also have the kind of dedicated Chaos Marine lists as well as the kind of Traitor Legion list. So you've got specific ones for like the Iron Warriors. So I've got an Iron Warriors force of maybe 4,000 or 5,000 points of just Iron Warriors stuff, which is for the most part it's Chaos Space Marines, but they've got specific things for the Iron Warriors. But they've got their own Leviathan, they've got their Bombards and Vindicators, and there's not the Tech Marines, the equivalent. They're the baddie Tech Marines, whatever they're called. But yeah, they've added that, and they've added things like the Alpha Legion and specific units for World Eaters for the kind of the Heresy era stuff as well. So it really has fleshed out, and you can build really flavorful forces within the Net Epic kind of ecosystem. And one of the ones I really love is it's just the kind of Lost and the Damned or the Chaos Renegades list, where it's all just ragtag trolls and minotaurs and non-power specific demons, that kind of thing. They're all mixed in together, and you've got cultists and horseback and Lehman Russ, and you've got that whole element to it, which is quite cool. Again, I don't know how effective they are in game because you're effectively taking Imperial Guard and some orcs and some random stuff in there, but it'd be a cool thing to have. And just from a kind of modelling perspective and maybe using up some of your, or if you've got a limited collection, you can build a Chaos Force from, if you've got some orcs, if you've got some Imperial Guard, if you've got some Marines, you could pull all that together into a Lost Nadam or Renegades force, and it works well, and it's it's quite thematic as well. So I think they're a really cool force in Net Epic, possibly just a little bit neglected in second edition for the other factions that aren't Khorne, but hey.
Yeah, the one other thing I would say about Net Epic, which I find quite tricky about it, is that the likes of Rhinos and so on, with second edition you could just add them to anything because it was basically a general chaos card, so you could add them to any kind of faction. And I don't think you can do that in Net Epic. I think you can only really attach that to the actual Space Marines Century.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot more restrictions in terms of allies and kind of list building with it. They've done away with, for the most part, they've done away with the kind of army restrictions around Greater Demons and Primarchs for the Chaos Sentries, I think. But yeah, there's, to field some Chaos Marines, you've got to have a certain points value in that. It's 25% or 75% if they're your main force, that kind of thing. So there's a bit more nuance when it comes to army building or list building, which I guess makes sense considering the sheer amount of units that they have for Chaos. It could be easy enough to create some sort of broken soup list or whatever they call it.
Well, I still feel that their units are so slow moving and so difficult that it could be quite tricky. I do prefer the kind of versatility of second edition, I have to say, in terms of the army building. I do obviously veer towards Net Epic for those berserkers, which I love so much. But I think it's easier because I find that sometimes when I'm building in the epic with it, that I think I've got an army list and I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. And it sometimes can be quite tricky actually getting the points values for whatever reason. I don't know. That's just something I kind of come up against. Whereas with that flexibility in second edition, you can kind of patch things quite easily with the likes of rhinos, for example. If you needed transports or whatever, if it just was 50 points, rhinos always come in handy, even if you don't have any troops to go on them, because steal objectives is what I like to do with them, as you know well.
It's worth mentioning as well that because they're not attached to the card or because they're not part of the detachment, they can go off and do their own thing. You effectively you can load the troops up into them, drop your troops off, and then go and grab an objective with those rhinos. Whereas with your loyalist marines, you're kind of tied. Your rhinos are tied to that detachment for coherency and stuff. So they're definitely a good dad.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I think it's in as an optional rule in Net Epic that you can have the transports break off and do their own thing. It certainly brings a different dynamic to the game, and you definitely couldn't do it in second, as far as I remember. That the rhinos still had to stay, which always seemed a bit pointless and a bit annoying to me. That the rhinos would just be wasted. As soon as they dropped off the troops, they were basically sitting hiding. If they dropped them off in a building or behind the woods, they hide behind that cover and do nothing really effectively the whole game. But then on the other hand, that's when I started getting a bit kind of it's a bit gamey. Basically, you can, if once they're set loose, you can start charging them everywhere and stealing objectives. Chaos can certainly do with it. That I would say that about it. So it's a rule that I quite like. It makes more sense to me that the rhinos would be freed up to do whatever you want them to do, but at the same time, I think it can actually get a bit monotonous that as an opponent you're sitting there watching. Right, I know he's going to charge them because he's going to try and steal an objective. Which one is he going to go for? And make sure that it sometimes ties up your forces, which maybe is an unfair advantage because it's a 50-point formation, tying up potentially something a lot more expensive and making it having to stay in the objective because the rhinos are going to steal it.
Something that's kind of handled differently in other editions and other rule sets, where like I think in third edition the rhinos are effectively they're ablative rhinos. You use them once you drop off your troops, you then use them as a shield for your forces because they've got no firepower at all. They've got no use after that, so they're kind of just used as a bit of a meat shield to soak up some damage. There's better ways of handling it. I don't like the idea of these transports dropping off troops and then suddenly become Rambo and driving off into the middle of the battlefield by themselves. If it was those guys that were driving the transports, they should have been out, in the first place. But it's a wee bit, and I think that's why I like the idea in second edition of if you take dedicated transports for a unit, then they are tied to that unit. Whereas if they're taken as a specialist card, then they're a bit more like a specialist unit that happens to transport troops, but they can also do their own thing as scouting or recon or objective grabbing, that kind of thing.
Sure. And once again, I derailed the conversation. Sorry.
That's all right. I believe we were just coming on to your 4,000 point list. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm just going to race through this because again a lot of it's the same. Angron's in there, the Cannon's a corner in there, 2 lots of Corn Juggers, the World Eaters, 3 lots of Rhinos. Again, it's only 2 cards if you're looking on YouTube. Lord of Battles plus 3 sets again of Demon Engines, same selection. I've also taken, this time once I'm up to 4,000, I've finally managed to get onto another power, and I'm taking Tzeentch, and I've taken Magnus the Red. Magnus is actually one of the greater demons who actually is quite good, or has a potential to be quite good. The danger is, well, I'll say what the good points are first of all, I suppose, would be the best thing about him is that he's got that beam of power, and it's got 100 range, it's 1 dice, but it's 2 or more to hit, and it's a -6 to save modifier, meaning nothing can stop it, and it's got penetrating damage of +3, so effectively he's a Titan killer. Like, if you strip the shields of a Titan, the Titan is effectively dead. Well, depending on where you hit, even a weapon would get a flashback, but if you were lucky enough to hit the head or reactor, it's game over for that Titan. So he actually, I do think, is a brilliant greater demon, which is why I would always gravitate towards him if I was taking Tzeentch as my first choice. And I've taken Tzeentch Flamers. Now, I thought I had 2 squads of Tzeentch Flamers when I built this. And when you see the pictures, you'll see that I don't. I've only got 1 set, and you'll see I've just proxied something else, which is a proxy actually for a different unit, and I'll explain that in the 5,000 point list. But anyway, I don't particularly think the Flamers are that great, but it's one of those things. This is where the 3 card thing was kind of coming in, and it was stopping me perhaps getting something a bit better. So it's not that I particularly like the Tzeentch Flamers, but I wanted something that was flavourful and had to be cheap, just the way that the points were kind of working out at this stage. I've taken 2 lots of the Disc Riders. I've only come to the realisation when we started talking about this for the podcast that I've been playing Disc Riders really badly for a long time. When I've only finally cracked how I'm supposed to play them. I've always played them badly because I've used them a bit like you would use bikes. Because they are fairly fast.
Yep.
And I don't think that's how they're meant to be used. I think you're supposed to, yes, use them, turn one, charge them, get them in. I would treat them like a grav tank. That's exactly how I think they should be played now. I don't know if that sounds weird or not, what your thoughts are on that, but
No, I think I'm in agreement with you.
because they've got a kind of decent weapon on them. It's
And it's a 5+ to hit, -1 save modifier, 50 centimeter range.
yeah, and it has a skimmer special ability, so they can do the pop-up attacks like the grav tanks would. So for once, I feel like it's a unit that's actually pretty decent in terms of, because of the speed of it, you can get it into position at the end of turn 1, no problem, and then turn 2 and onwards, first fire all the way, and just try and pick off. Okay, the -1 isn't exactly amazing. You're going to struggle against certainly super heavies. You've got no chance really, a 1 in 6 chance because of the -1. But in Land Raiders even, I would be a bit. I think a grav tank would probably, with a 3+, anything that was a 3+, I kind of feel, well then it's only a 50-50 chance of them saving. Obviously better against cavalry and infantry if you can see them, but they're worth a go at kind of some of the lighter transports, I suppose, if they're out on the table against you. So yeah, I've been playing them so badly for years, just throwing them in, and because their calf isn't quite, I think it's +2, because they've only got the +2. Most bikes have got +3. They don't tend to do that well, but then play your chaos cards and it would balance it out. But
yeah,
I still think, now that I've kind of thought about this, I've thought, yeah, first fire behind something, pop-up attacks, that's the way to go with them.
Yeah, they strike me as quite a versatile unit. I mean, you can do a lot with them. You can do that. They can get into close combat and still have a good chance of surviving.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, though. I think getting them behind a building and kind of popping up and doing that, especially if you can get them around the side flanks and do some side shots against armor, then you're going to get better save modifiers that way.
Yeah, that's a good tip. You might actually be able to outfox your opponent, actually, and then I think about it. If you charged in first turn, and particularly if you were in a pattern of using them as what I was describing as skimmer attacks, you could really get the jump on an opponent by charging them in turn 2 and getting behind their lines, and then popping up from the third turn from behind and shooting to get that -2 against quite a lot of their tanks if they're all sat in first fire.
Yeah, I think taking 2 cards of them, like you said, is probably a good idea as well, because then you're talking then 10 attack dice potentially popping up, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, definitely. Not bad for 400 points. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and that's my 4,000. So we're on to the last one, the 5,000 points.
Sure. So it should be a fairly similar one. I'll work backwards this time for reasons that will become known in a second. So I've got my Nurgle-ish contingent, which is the Plague Tower, Chaos Marines, Land Speeders, and Trolls. I've got my Slanesh contingent, which is the Keeper of Secrets, the Subjugator Scout Titans, the Beast Riders, and Demonettes. I've got my Lord of Battles for Khorne with the 2 cards of Demon Engines and the Chaos Space Marines riding in the Death Dealer. And I've bolstered the Bloodthirster a little bit this time. So he's now got 2 units of Flesh Hounds with him, mostly because I've got 3 units of them painted. So I'll try and get as many on the table as I can. The Bloodletters, the Jugger, and then this time I've also taken the Banelord, which is the Khorne-specific demon version of the Warlord Titan for 900 points. So yeah, the reason I brought that is mostly because it's a cool model. It's like every teenage boy's or every teenage kid's dream model, I think, maybe at that era. If you played Epic, because it had the cool factor. I think we'd all seen the kind of Chaos Titans, or we'd all seen the ubiquitous Beetleback Titan, and it was just a kind of reimagining of that, which is pretty cool. And it's got that same rule surrounding it for if Khorne are winning, then it gets additional bonuses, I think, which is on a Titan's a massive bonus to have. It's got very kind of specific weapons. Again, it's got the kind of Rack of Havoc missiles, which are pretty devastating. You can loose them. You get 6 of them. They're kind of one-shot things, but you can loose them all in one turn. And then it's got it's closer in Doomfists and Doom Burners, which again are shorter range than the likes of your Quake Cannons and Volcano Cannons you might normally have on a Warlord. But if you can get in close, then you're going to do some damage with it. So yeah, I'd take that. I've never fielded it, but I'd like to. So that's why I've added it in here. And maybe I was also getting a bit sleepy when I was making my list at this point and just thought, 900 points, there you go, chuck that in. So
Yeah, I have played the Bane Lord a couple of times. I'm not mad in it, especially for 900 points. Yeah, I just don't think it's as effective as the as equivalent warlords. And again, I think the model kind of deserves a bit more because again, I totally agree. It's got that cool factor, and it should be, for me, it should be a bit cheaper just because it's not quite as effective. The rack thing is quite good when it comes off. But certainly, I didn't feel like I was doing the same kind of damage that I would expect for 900 points. So I suppose that's my reservation. And I hate that because I really hate it when that's quite a few things now actually in Chaos that I'm saying I love the models, but I just want the actual unit to work a bit better than it actually does. They've all got that kind of really cool design. So yeah, it's just all very tricky, and I think they're probably the hardest force of all of them, really, to get a bit of success with, and you're going to need to do a bit of experimenting. And you'd certainly need to get used to probably losing a few battles at the start before you start winning some. So I personally probably wouldn't take the Bane Lord as much as I would love to take it, because I just think the model's spot on, you know. So that was your 5,000 points. So mine, again, has got a lot of the same stuff. Angron, Bloodletters, 2 Corn Juggers, World Eaters, Cannon of Corn, got 3 Rhinos in there again, Lord of Battles, 3 lots of Demon Engines, Magnus the Red for the Zinch. So I've kept the 2 Zinch Disc Riders in, and I've kind of switched things up a wee bit there. I've taken a Troll Warband, which again, I agree with you. I've been caught out against them before. What I like about them is that they're really frustrating for an opponent to play against, because even when they kill them, that regeneration thing, 50-50 chance that they'll get back up again, that really did my head in when I was facing them. I really hated that. But fair enough, it's a good thing because, as I say, I feel Chaos needs that kind of edge in close combat to make up for the shortcomings that we've kind of mentioned up until now. I've taken this time the Lord of Change, which is a really kind of cool attack that I really like. The Bolt of Change, from memory, it's called.
Yep. So 35 centimeter range, hits on a 3.
Yeah, it's only -1 to save modifier, but if it's destroyed, it becomes Chaos Spawn, and then you place that 6 centimeter template over the target. And all models at least half under the template are locked in combat, and they've got to fight this thing. So it can be a really good disruptor. It can't make pop-up attacks, even though it's counted as a skimmer, which is a slightly odd thing to me. But anyway, rules are rules. So yeah, I quite like him. I like that. I think that's a power. Again, it's a bit like the Magnus's one. I actually think it can be quite effective and quite worrying to play against. And it has a nice kind of, I like the wee template it's got for it that you got with 2nd edition, where it's kind of all tentacles and things like that are on the actual template itself when it takes over the destroyed unit. And I've also taken Zinch Horrors. Now, I don't think they're particularly effective, but a bit like the Trolls, they've got that real frustration factor for an opponent, that when they shoot them, they split into 2. Yes, they're slightly less powerful, but it's one of those things that's going to really irritate an opponent, because they're going to have to shoot so many of them before they actually break them, that it becomes, they can get overwhelmed by numbers, so even though they are weaker, you're probably going to have them ganging up once they start splitting into 2 on enemy units, and you're getting that extra d6 when you do that. So I actually think they're quite a fun unit. And they're the ones that you'll see are proxied in the pictures with, I can't remember who's, I think maybe it was Micro World, possibly. Again, yeah, they don't particularly look like Zinch Horrors, but it was one of those ones that was actually quite difficult from memory, because you had to buy so many of them just to have one squad. I think you had to buy about basically 3 packs of them just to have one squad.
That's right, yeah.
Because obviously, again, I came late to it, and it was eBay I was on, and they weren't really cheap, so I felt for what I was getting, I just wasn't prepared to spend the money. So apologies to the purists if you're looking at that thinking, I don't like that. That's okay. I don't mind. My wallet's happier for it. So, but yeah, they do the job for me. They're blue and pink. That's good enough for me. I'm quite happy with that. And the other 2 units I've taken at last, we've got some flyers in here. I know these 2 came late on in the game as well. These are another ones after Titan Legions, is that right, Craig?
No, the Zinch flyers came out before Titan Legions, kind of White Dwarf 145-ish, I think.
Right.
They were in the Space Marine Battles book. That's certainly where I first encountered them, with the templates and the rules and stuff for them. So
you'll see that I didn't have the actual cards. I've kind of pasted in copies of the cards onto my document, because I certainly didn't have them. They definitely weren't in Renegades at the time.
No.
Silver Towers of Zinch, I quite like to be honest, if you weren't playing, because again, it's one of those things in the Epic, you can have animosity between the powers. But if you weren't playing that, I would actually use the Silver Towers of Zinch to cover probably a squadron of the Demon Engines, because basically what you do is you place the two Silver Towers 10 centimetres apart, and they basically create this kind of, I suppose it's the same kind of thing you're talking about, the kind of glitter effect or whatever. It kind of basically makes it harder for enemy units to fire at anything beyond that. So it's like I suppose, I think it's meant to be like, template's meant to be like 4 or 5 centimeters high from memory, and basically anything that fires through it is going to get a -1 to hit those units. So it gives your demon engines a bit of longevity. Basically, they've got a bit of a better chance of surviving until what I was talking about earlier on, advanced phase of turn 2. That also applies to the silver towers themselves, that rule. So they're also at -1. So yeah, they're quite tricky to hit, and even against Marines are going to struggle with that, because they've only got, most of their rolls are 5+. So you're changing it from a 1 in 3 chance to a 1 in 6 chance, which is quite important, and makes it very difficult for them as a consequence for them to hit. But of course, yeah, all it takes is one lucky hit, and if one of them goes down, that field goes, and the -1 no longer applies. What I would say about it is it's got 50 range, it's got 4 attack dice, 5 or 6 -1, and it's got a beam of power, which is 75 range at last, 75 range in the Chaos Army. 1 dice 3+ with a -3, so it's actually, they're really powerful, so I find them really good units. And as I'd say, I like the fact that they're a unit that I feel is quite dependable, and it can actually do something to kind of boost your other forces. And yeah, the Doomwings are the last squadron that I took, and they're basically the same as the Cauldron of Blood earlier on I was mentioning. They use the fire template, and again, that's pretty powerful in 2nd edition, getting that and smoke them out, all those infantry units. I suppose the downside of having those connections would be if you kill enough infantry with them, if you've got the Cauldron of Blood and them, potentially the rest of your Demon Horde won't have too much to fight, and then you maybe need to commit them to attacking vehicles and things like that. In practice, really, I have found that even though you can, when you place the 3 templates down, quite often things will survive, particularly if they've got saving throws in the first place. But then again, infantry doesn't. So yeah, really handy. They're not going to do much against enemy flyers. You probably want your Fire Lord in there, which is another one which we haven't looked at. The Fire Lords, at least, it's got these template. It's got the flame cannon, which does the same kind of thing as the Doomwing does, and the las cannon it's got 4 las cannon, 50 range, 5 or 6 -1. So, but it's got 75 movement. And the Doomwings, that's the other thing I should have said about the Doomwings. They've got 100 move, so you can be really, really brutal with them. Really get in behind enemy units, and turn 1 and then turn 2 you can really do some damage. In fact, you could advance them. What am I talking about? You could advance a Doomwing, 100 range, get it anywhere, flame out the thing. So yeah, they're actually really powerful, and a good argument for actually that I should be using more Zinch in my forces.
I think so, yeah. Combining Zinch and Khorne is a really powerful combination for sure.
But yeah, it's my kind of love of those Demon Engines. It's a bit of a problem. It's 900 points worth, and am I really getting the value for them? I suppose it's a bit like the Banelord. It's more that you're taking them because you love the models themselves, the miniatures. I think there could be more sensible ways to spend those points. But anyway, I've chosen, that's it. I've done what I've done here. And that's it, 5,000 points. So there's a lot of units we haven't looked at.
Yeah, not as many as you'd think, I don't think, to be honest. I think a lot of them are covered in the kind of general Marine and Imperial Guard lists. There's things like Cultists, which are effectively just Imperial Guard units. Dreadnoughts again, which are maybe a wee bit different. I think they get 2 attack dice this time, so they're kind of decent. And Beastmen, again, are quite similar. I think we touched on them in Imperial Guard list. Chaos Squats, poor Chaos Squats. It's like, I just can't see a time when I'd ever take them. And in fact, I've not even got any painted in the army. I think in my many years of buying and selling Epic, I've probably went through thousands of Chaos Squats and got rid of them every time and never bothered painting them. The stat line on them actually is kind of what I wish Tactical Marines were, because you get that 2 attack dice, still 5 to hit, no save modifier, but they've got a better stat line than your Tactical Marine, which is weird.
Well, why don't you like them then?
I think there's better things to take. Again, they're another 10 centimeter moving, 2 attack dice, 50 centimeter range, no modifier. I can't see any time when they would ever come into play. It's just, there's so many. So I'm saying for the variety of units that Chaos have, a lot of them have got almost the same stat line. And they're either no range at all, but +4, +5 in close assault, which is great, but they can't move very fast, so they, you never get to use them. Or they've got that 50 centimeter range, no save modifier, and still 10 centimeter move. So I just don't feel that you get any use out of them. There's things like the androids as well, which although they're like, it's that whole crazy thing where you can't control them and you have to roll off with your opponent to see who gets to place an order for them or whatever. It's bonkers. It's like, unless you were playing some kind of like drafting list thing, which I think is something we could maybe explore at some point, where you maybe have to take some units you don't want to take, then they're just pointless. Like, I painted them because I like them, and I loved Space Crusade. They were the androids in Space Crusade, so that's why I painted them. But other than that, I can't see any reason you'd ever field them. But yeah, I think we've more or less covered off everything. I think there's a couple of the lesser demons for the factions we didn't put too much effort into or put too much focus on that are there. But again, none of them are worth writing home about.
Yeah, probably the main thing you mentioned about Slaanesh. I know you took the knights, but there are kind of different ones.
Yeah, they're my kind of holy grail at the moment, is trying to find these Slaanesh knights, because, like I say, they came in towards the end of second edition, and I don't think there was too many of them out there, and they've got this kind of artificially blown up price on them now for what they are. I'm not a massive fan of the models, not a massive fan of knights in general, so I'm only going to pick them up if I ever see them going cheap, which is unlikely. But they've got some cool rules. Some of them have got, so the whole thing, it's this whole House Divine Knight household, and they've given them some kind of lore specific rules. So I think for one of the types, I can't remember if it's Hell Strider or Hell Knight, but they can increase their coherency up to 10 centimeters, so you can kind of spread them out. The other type of knight gets like a scouting bonus, similar to Scout Marines or whatever, where you can charge them up the battlefield before the orders are placed the first turn, which is kind of handy. And it's also got like a bit of a kind of anti-tank weapon on it, decent gun on it. I've forgotten what the special rule is for the tiny ones, but it's quite decent. But none of them they're very expensive to take them, points value wise as well. And when I was looking at these lists, I was considering trying to pick up the models, but then I was looking at the stats and I was like, I wouldn't even take them if I had the models in a lot of cases. I really do like the Scout Titans, the Subjugators,
I was going to say that.
the Questors are the other ones, which are kind of like, they're okay. They sound decent as well, but I don't like them as much as the Subjugators. So I'm quite happy with just the Subjugators out of that article or that list of released units.
So yeah, that's our take on Chaos, but I'm sure there must be some of you out there who have better army lists, especially because this was our one that we were kind of weakest on, would be Chaos, but just because of the sheer variety, and I think again because both of us were so late in getting our forces. So, but yeah, please tell us what you think yourselves, because we'd always like to play Chaos a bit better and have a bit more success than we usually have. And if you've had the same problems, I'm interested to know if it's just us or there is a way around these things. So, what are we thinking next time? Orcs?
Yeah, I think we've got orcs to do. Yeah, we're both putting off Tyranids till the end, I believe, potentially.
Yeah.
If we thought struggling with the rules for Chaos was bad, wait till you see the Tyranids.
Yeah, I know. I'm definitely going to do something about painting that Tyranid army up, because I want to get playing them. The few occasions I've played against them, I've found them really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to know actually if it is all about second edition or if NetEpic's actually made them tougher because of the fact that NetEpic added all the kind of hit location charts.
I don't know. I mean, from reading the rules, it looks like it's mostly been translated one for one. I don't think there's been massive amounts of stuff in it.
Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. So. So yeah, sorry, now that I've just said that about Chaos, and yeah, Tyranids is definitely a weak spot for us because my army hasn't been fully painted. I think you have played them once or twice, but definitely haven't been a favourite, and really need to sit and do the rules for them properly and work out how they work. And I know that they can be really powerful on the board, so that'll be interesting. But I think before that, I'd quite like to do squats as well.
Definitely.
I know you're not so invested in squats as I am.
I think just with the low model count for them, I don't massively think there's much point. I think both of our lists would be almost identical, barring maybe a couple of units. Plus, I can't be bothered trying to get everything painted in time for that episode. I've painted all the armour. I need to do all the infantry and bikes, and it's just sitting there taunting me. So I'll get around to it. But
I think that's a fair deal. You can deal with the Tyranids, and I'll sit back and listen, and I'll do the squats because I'm pretty familiar with them.
Oh yeah.
Did a little article about the squats actually. For anybody that's not aware of it, check out, do a little Googling. Hero Hammer, which was, I mentioned Crown of Command earlier on, they've just published the second issue of their fanzine, which effectively looks, to all intents and purposes, like an old White Dwarf magazine. It's really beautifully presented, the articles are great in it, and it's a great bunch of guys that have been working on it. I had the privilege of just submitting a little article about the kind of thing that we've been doing here, picking a 3,000 point army list, and a little wee article about that. So check that out, it's free, and please have a look. I know that I'll probably sound biased because I've got a feature in it, but it's genuinely, I'd looked at issue 1 when it came out a few months ago, and I thought the same thing, regardless of whether I was involved in it or not. It's really great, and if you love 90s gaming, which I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast as second edition players, that's the kind of period of White Dwarf that they grew up with, then I think you'll love Hero Hammer, so please check that out. Look up Crown of Command, there'll be links about there if you're on Twitter and things like that as well. On Facebook, look out for their page, because it'll have those links on it. So, and I've been doing some videos on the YouTube channel, and I've been adapting Beyond the Green River, which is
Carandaras, is it?
Caradras. Caradras. There you go.
Frank.
I've been adapting some of his campaign. It's just fantastic material to work with, and hopefully the videos are quite good fun. And so yeah, hopefully it'll be one of those every month. So please have a look at that if you want to see some more epic. And that's Epic Armageddon, so at least it's something for those fans as well, because typically my videos have all been second edition or stroke net epic and stroke one take on the rules. So yeah, that's something else to look at in the YouTube channel. And yeah, I think that's me done my plugging. Without further ado, thanks for joining me tonight, Craig. Again, sharing your thoughts with Chaos. Enjoyed it.
No worries. Cheers.
And until next time, keep on living the life of Die.